All right, good to see everybody. Normally we'd be doing this down in Indianapolis, but this will have to do. As coaches right now, we're in the middle of our scheme evaluation like we talked about before. We're got a couple weeks left of that. We're also putting our scout hats on for half the day and watching some free agency guys a couple weeks ago, watching some draft eligible guys this week and into the future, and been on some Zoom calls and some FaceTime calls with some draft eligible prospects. So that is taking up the majority of our day. As we sit here in March, our focus as a staff, as a team, is we have to get better. We have to improve. And we have to, as coaches, really pull this thing apart and find ways to improve schematically. We have to evolve. And I think that's been a big part of our process to date. I think also as coaches, we have to get better. I have to be a better coach next year for this team. And that's my goal. And we're working really hard to find different ways for each of us to get better. So that's really the charge of what we've been working on in the last few weeks. And as we move forward into this offseason, we'll see how it all shakes out and see what it looks like. But in the meantime, the focus is definitely we have to get better. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Coach. The first question will go to Tom Withers.
Thank you, Rob. Hey, Kevin, good to see you. First of all, congratulations on the AP Coach of the Year award. Also curious, now that we seem to be trending in the right direction with the pandemic, have you gotten any sense from the league as to what your off-season workout schedule might look like?
I really haven't, Tom, and it's that's something that we're used to, the unknowns. So we'll see when that comes out, and I'll take a look at the schedule and we'll plan out what that looks like. But we'll be ready to pivot with whatever the league and players agree upon.
When you talk about an evolution of the really, you said you want to get better across the board, and that kind of goes without saying. But is there anything in particular, Kevin, that jumped out to you that has to go to the top of the list?
I wouldn't tell you anything in particular, Tom. I would tell you certainly offensively, defensively. I know Preef is working on it, and we've talked about his special teams. With your scheme, year to year, you evolve. And sometimes that's a different personnel group. Sometimes that's a different play type. It really varies based on the players you have and moving them into different positions. So to say that we'll get completely away from who we are, either on offense or defense, I don't think that's fair to say. But I will tell you that we're going to try to evolve within the scheme and continue to make ourselves difficult to defend on offense, and then defensively find ways to frustrate an offense. And that's what we're working real hard on right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Mary Kay Cabot will have our next question.
Yeah, Coach, just wondering, David Njoku has had some things to say this offseason that still sort of make it seem like he's not entirely certain if this is the right fit for him or this is the right place for him. And he's obviously under contract to you guys. My question to you is, with everybody, your staff, your players, all pulling in the same direction and everybody, so all in and on board with everything, how do you feel about having somebody on your football team that maybe perhaps might not 100% want to be here?
Well, David's somebody that I respect and value the production he gave us on the field and, the teammate that he is. So as it relates to him in particular, I'm not aware of that, Mary Kay. I know I've had a lot of conversation with a lot of players over the course of the season, over the course of many seasons. So I will continue to have that dialogue with all of our guys to see where they are, but I'm not aware of anything in particular with David.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Nate Ulrich is next.
Hey, Kevin. Good to see you. There was so much focus recently, from fans and media. I'm sure a lot of teams too about JJ free agency. So with him, wrapping that up yesterday with the Cardinals, I just wanted to ask you, was there any sense of disappointment on your end that you weren't able to pair him with Myles Garrett? And moving forward, what do you think about the opportunities at defensive end when you're talking about checking out the film of some free agents and some draft prospects?
Yeah, Nate, I wouldn't get into specifics about any player. I would just tell you that Andrew and his staff work really hard as they walk in this building every day to find avenues to improve our team. So whether that's the draft or free agency or trades, that's something that they work very hard on.
And just to kind of follow up there, do you feel like there are a lot of good opportunities for you guys to, address that defensive end position? Free agency, draft, is it looking like a strong class, in both of those areas?
Yeah, Nate, I can't tell you strong class, weak class. I would just tell you there's always going to be opportunities to improve our team. And we know year to year, the faces change. New guys come in, guys leave. That's just the nature of this beast. So there are always going to be opportunities to improve the roster.
Thank you, Nate. We'll go to Scott Petrick.
Hey, Kevin, following up on what Tom asked you about the offseason program, would it be disappointing if you had a second straight season that was all remote?
I wouldn't call it disappointing. I think we're ready for whatever's thrown at us. As you can imagine, as coaches, we'd love to have our hands on our guys and take them through drills, but we'll see how it shakes out. And we'll be ready. Whatever the rules are, I think that's what is most important for me and our coaches is we're just looking forward to finding out what those rules are, and then we'll go from there.
And when you talk about interviewing some of the draft prospects, obviously you'd be doing that if you were at the combine. So how different is that? And do you feel like you're missing out a little bit by not being in the room? I remember seeing the Jedrick Wills interview last year. You got to meet him, at Indy.
Yeah, I think we've gotten pretty good at this Zoom. And I think we've had a lot of meetings with potential players like this, and we've been doing it this week already, a few days into it, and we're going to continue to have more of those this week. We hired a coach via Zoom and this off season, so that's a first for me. But that's another segue into what I think is a really big deal in bringing our coaching staff back. We did hire John DeCoster as an offensive quality control coach, but the fact that we're bringing all of our coaches back, I think, is a very, very big deal, and I'm very proud of that fact.
Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Daryl Ryder will have our next question.
Hey, Coach, good to see you. I want to ask you about the defensive side of the ball. You talked about the need to get better. If I counted correctly, you got 6 or 7 guys on that side of the ball that are headed for free agency. Obviously, we're not close enough to the league year where you want to get into too many specifics, but where are you at as far as bringing some of those guys back? As far as your conversations with Andrew Berry, how confident are you going to be able to do that? And then also just the opportunity, if you can't bring those guys back, what are you looking at as far as trying to get that side of the football better?
Yeah, Daryl, I'd tell you, I'd love to bring everybody back. I've had really great relationships with all these players, and you want to bring them all back. And we just realize that this is a business, and sometimes that's not possible. But I will tell you, we've had a lot of really good conversations with Andrew and his staff and the coaches and trying to outline a plan for this offseason. Will there be new faces? Absolutely, there will be. How many? I don't know, but that's a process that we're working through.
And just a generic question just about this whole new environment that we've been in for the last year. The commissioners kind of talked about how maybe some virtual elements in that will be carried forward, and you guys will be able to continue to do that. The combine obviously isn't taking place this year, and you're having to do some things different. How much do you anticipate that these things are going to change, that you're going to have to adapt and kind of incorporate a new way of doing things, not only when it comes to the draft process, but just the off-season program in general?
Yeah, it's a good question, Daryl. Something we've talked a lot about. If portions of this offseason are virtual, we've been through it. Now, I'll tell you that we found out things we really liked about it, some things we didn't. We changed the way we were running meetings throughout the course of the spring. So we're always going to search for the best way to do it. And that's been a major focus of ours in the last few weeks and months is if this thing is virtual, what's the best way to do this? And I think that the answer is probably constantly evolving. And, you know, one week we may try one way and the next week we may try a different way. And I'm talking just Zoom and how we meet and those type of things. So we'll make sure that we think long and hard about how to do it. I will tell you, having one season of that under our belts, I think should help.
Thank you, Daryl. Fred Greetham, you're up.
Hey, congratulations again on Coach of the Year. Hadn't had a chance to tell you in person, but looking specifically at Baker Mayfield, it looks like he really struggled, you know, in the first 6 games, but then about the 7th game on, he really played well. Would you attribute that specifically to the involvement in the offense, his familiarity, or what specifically was the biggest difference, you know, down the stretch for him?
Yeah, I think, Fred, it's a good question. I think Baker definitely became more comfortable in what we were doing. But I would tell you that I became more comfortable with his skill set go across the board. I was learning about our players. Our coaches were learning about our players throughout that beginning portion of the season. So I just think it was the natural evolution of us as an offense as we all learned about each other a little bit more.
Thanks, Fred. Jeff Shadell, go to you.
Hey, Kevin, I have 2 questions. One, Jordan Elliott, you might be using him more in this next season. Can you talk about his development? And secondly, I'd like you to go into detail how an offense evolves from year 1 to year 2.
Yeah, Fred, I would tell you, Jeff, I would tell you first with Jordan, I was really pleased with how he came along. He was a young player, was very, very eager to learn, very eager to do it the right way, practiced hard. I think he got in some games, had I don't know, maybe 16 snaps, and then maybe the next week the matchup didn't call for him to play as much. So he was somebody that we brought along. I think he's trending absolutely in the right direction, and this is a big offseason for him to take that jump from year 1 to year 2. And as it pertains to were you saying specifically the offense, Jeff? Yeah, I think the answer, it may not be apparent in week 1. I think for us, we just need to make sure that we're putting our guys in position to succeed. And that really could be any type of run, any type of pass, any personnel, any formation. We want to make sure that we're exploring all those avenues that stay true to who we are, but also allow our guys to grow in this scheme. And again, just very simply find ways to be explosive on offense. So I know that's a very general question, but I think for us, what we've talked long and hard about as an offensive coaching staff is we want to have our core, but man, we got to make sure that we're pivoting week in and week out.
Thank you, Jeff. Our next question will be from Tony Grossi.
Hey, Kevin, good to see you again. Some of my questions were asked, so I'll go to my alternative. You carried a player last year on IR, pass rusher named Curtis Weaver. As you go through this offseason acquisition period, how realistic is it for this player to be involved prominently on the field next year?
Yeah, Tony, I think remains to be seen for any of these young players. I mean, Curtis, it'll be his first year really with us because he spent so much time rehabbing. So it's his first year with us, his second year in the NFL. Those are the type of guys that we're going to give them every opportunity to grow, and they got to put the work in to make it happen. So I'd lump Curtis in with really, you could put him with the second-year players, or you could put him with the rookies and say this is truly his first year with us.
And another question I had is Chris Hubbard. Can you give us an update? Would he be healthy enough to include him in the offseason and training camp stuff?
Yeah, Tony, I don't really have an update per se on Hub. I did get to see Hub in here for the first time. Looks great. He's progressing nicely, but got to catch up with him for a couple minutes this morning.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. We'll go to Dan Lobby.
Hey, Coach. Good to see you. Another question about evolving the offense. I'm just curious, does that involve a lot of looking internally, or are you also spending time like watching, other teams that maybe run a similar scheme or other similar offenses? What's kind of the mix there?
Yeah, Dan, I think what we're trying to do is fine tune and hone in on the things that we're good at. while looking at what other people are doing and seeing if that fits us. I make no bones about it. We will steal from everybody if it's a good idea. So we're watching a lot of tape of the NFL players. We're watching college tape. And if we think it might help us, we'll definitely make it part of our offense.
And then one more question just about, you mentioned all your coaches are back and you have a good number of young coaches. How much emphasis do you put on coach development so that maybe down the road, these guys kind of get where you've gotten in your career? How much emphasis is there within your staff on that?
Yeah, Dan, I put a ton of emphasis on it. And that's, I'm kind of on our coaches right now and they know it. I want each one of them to get better. And we're going to spend some time in this off season as it relates to professional development to make sure that we're giving all of our coaches and every resource we can to help them become better coaches, because I think it makes us better for the Browns, and also think it obviously improves their job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Jake Trotter is next.
Yeah. Hey, Kevin. As somebody mentioned earlier, Baker took a obviously big step forward last season. What do you see as his trajectory now that he has a year experience in your system? He doesn't have to focus a good chunk of his off season on learning another offense. So just in terms of his development and what he can still be, what do you see from him going forward?
Yeah, Jake, I wouldn't put any parameters on any of our guys when it comes to their trajectory. I would just tell you, I know he can continue to get better. He's another person that is eager to get better. He's chomping at the bit. And when he walks in this building, or when we virtually see him next, we'll make sure that we outline some things that he can improve upon. But I think you all know this about Baker. He works really, really hard at his craft. And I think that's something when you do that, you got a chance.
Do you have any kind of update on, how Odell is coming along in his recovery?
I don't really have an update other than I know he's doing great. Our medical people are in contact with the guys he's working out with. As you can imagine, he's attacking this thing. So I know he's doing great, but no update to say where he is in the rehab, but he's doing really well.
Thank you, Jake. We'll go back to Mary Kay Cabot.
Yeah, Coach, you were talking about your coaching staff coming back intact. Will you perhaps give Callie an opportunity to assist on a position or add to her role in any way? I know she's already doing a lot, but maybe let her be assistant wide receivers coach or something like that.
So that's something, Mary Kay, that we are doing with all of our young assistant position coaches, if you will, moving them around. So making sure that the guys are working with positions that they didn't work with last season. So Callie, in year 2, I can speak from experience, and that job in year 2 will be easier than year 1. So she'll have some time freed up where she's going to work with Stump and the running backs in her free time and on the field.
Great, thank you. Will she have a title? Will she be, assistant running backs coach?
No.
No. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Nate Orrick, back to you.
Hey, Kevin. So with Greedy Williams and Grant Delpit, where are they at in their rehab? And I guess I would lump Odell in there too. You just got asked about him, but are these guys you think can be ready for, the start of training camp in August?
I think they're all progressing. I wouldn't lump them all together, Nate, because they're all different injuries, but I know they're all progressing. And I would, I could specifically speak to Grant. Saw him in there today. Looks great. He's coming along. I did see Greedy today. Again, we'll have more updates as we go. And then, like we talked about with Odell, I know he's doing great, but I don't have a specific timeline or anything like that.
Okay, so when it comes to the 2 DBs, I know you guys are encouraged by their progress, like you just said, but how much do you have to plan for not knowing exactly how it's going to get when they get back on the field? I mean, do you have to build insurance in to your roster when you're looking at these free agents and these draft prospects?
Yeah, I think with every position, you look at who's coming back, who's coming off of an injury, and how they're rehabbing. So that factors into all of it.
Thank you, Nate. Scott Petrick, you're up.
Hey, Kevin, when you look at Odell, the fact that he missed, the back half of the season, do you still think that he's positioned to take kind of that year two jump in your system like anybody else would be, even though he missed the time that he did?
Yes, I do. And again, he's, as you can imagine, very, very committed to getting back to 100%. He's well on his way in his rehab. So excited about his future.
And when you look at that receiver room, do you feel like you need to add another speed element, or does Odell have enough of that he kind of fills that role for you?
Yeah, I think Andrew and his staff will work through that, Scott, as it relates to free agency and the draft, and make sure that we're, as we bring guys in here, that they fit, the type of mold that we're looking for. Speed's an obvious thing in the wide receiver room. That's, always the number one trait that you're looking for, but ultimately it's got to be the right fit for us.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Marla Ridnour has our next question.
Yeah, Coach, good to see you. I don't know if you had time to reflect on the season. I know it's over, but do you consider this a breakthrough for the Browns? And do you feel that it's driving kind of the atmosphere in the building now, just, that you've sort of raised the level of football and expectations?
Yeah, Marla, I really look at it as year one for us. And that's all. I wasn't here prior to last year. So we laid a foundation, but it's really, really important that everybody in this building, all of our players, understand that we have to get better. And to say that we're just going to be right back where we left off, that's not the case. It just doesn't happen that way. You got to work at it.
And one quick thing, are you fully recovered from COVID? Can you smell and taste?
Yeah, smell and taste came back 3 weeks post-COVID, which was cause to celebrate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marla. We have time for 3 more. We'll start with Tony Grossi and then go to Aaron Goldhammer and Matt Fontana. Tony?
Hey, Kevin, if it is a normal training camp and a normal preseason, will you seek to schedule a joint practice?
I would, Tony, yes.
One only, or?
I think I'd have to work through that, see how long the preseason is, see what the schedule looks like. But I do think there's value in that if we can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. We'll go to Aaron Goldhammer.
Hey, Coach. Super Bowl was a month ago tomorrow, and I'm curious if you watched the game and sort of how you were feeling about how far your team is away from making it as you were watching the couple of playoff games that happened subsequent to the Browns getting knocked out.
Yeah, Aaron, definitely watch the Super Bowl. Every year you want to see what they're doing in that game. And I think as coaches, we're always looking at what the schemes are in that game because everyone's watching, and it's amazing how a play in that game will show up in week 1 of the season for everybody. So definitely looking at it from an X's and O's standpoint. But as it relates to us, I would just tell you, we go back to square one in 2021. We have a lot of work to do, and we're eager to get that work started whenever that may be.
Thank you, Aaron. And our final question goes to Matt Fontana.
Yeah, Kevin, wanted to ask, what's the biggest change from last offseason to this offseason? You got hired, you really didn't know a lot of these players as opposed to now where you got through the full season. And also, is there anything similar? I guess Zoom calls might be the answer to that question, but biggest change and something similar from last offseason?
Well, I think I'm really excited that I'm sitting here on March 2nd and our whole staff has been hired. We can go full speed ahead from a schematic standpoint of how we're putting this thing together. Really, you hit the ground running this year as opposed to last year where you're coming up with different words you want to call things. So that's obviously a big part of this. And then, I do want to go back to that virtual off-season program we had last year. We found a way to do it. It was never perfect. We're always looking for ways to tinker and make sure we're doing it right. But I think it's a benefit that we know some of the shortcuts on Zoom to begin with.